Hi, I'm Tony Sherborne. I know a lot of you now believe in this philosophy of mastery, that every student can achieve well, and some of you have even been trying to implement it yourself. Now, what you've told me is that it's quite challenging to create these formative assessments and relearning activities that you need to make the system work. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do some of that. In particular, how you can collect diagnostic information on students' understanding, and then for those who didn't get it first time, to use individualized relearning activities and give them a real second chance. So here's the Mastery Science system following the same 5 steps set out by Benjamin Bloom almost 50 years ago. Now, in contrast to some of the interventions that claim to improve student learning, this one has a massive body of research evidence showing that it can, when implemented well, make quite dramatic impacts on achievement. Where it starts is having some really clear mastery objectives, and that's why it works really well with the Key Stage 3 syllabus, which I designed with AQA to bake mastery in. In our syllabus, what's really important are these ideas, the core principles and generalizations and scientific models that help students understand what science is. And we've defined mastery at 2 different levels, know and apply, and these map onto the GCSE assessment objectives. Know means having a good model in your head, which you can recall but in familiar situations only, and that you don't fall prey to common misconceptions. Apply is more challenging because having mastered the idea itself, now you can use it in unfamiliar situations and to use reasoning instead of just recall. So that's what allows you to be able to answer the more challenging 6-mark questions at GCSE. Let's work through an example to see how the system works. Let's take gravity, and in this topic there are 2 ideas. We'll focus on just the first one, mass and weight. The way we've defined it, there's actually 3 parts to this idea, or facets as we call them, and that helps teaching and assessment. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, we've taught this in the best way we know how, and we're going to use a planned formative assessment process to find out whether students have mastered the idea with a mastery quiz, and then some of them who've mastered it will go on to engaging and challenging extension activities, while the ones who didn't are going to go on this relearn path. What we need is a reliable way of making that judgment. For creating a quiz, we start by making a specification. In other words, writing down all the facets of the idea we're trying to assess, as well as the misconceptions we want to check that students don't have. Those are going to become the distractors. And here we've got 6 questions we're writing at the know level, and having so many means you have a more reliable judgment. One example, question 3, that's to test 2 of the facets and 2 of the misconceptions. Here's the question. It's about a rocket taking off on the Earth and then on the Moon. And what students need to be able to recall is this idea that gravity is lower on the Moon, and that's what reduces the weight and reduces the force needed to take off. We also are checking in case they happen to believe that it's got something to do with air resistance, or they think that the mass is what's changed. So they've done a number of these questions, and then we add up all the points, but more importantly, we give everybody the feedback on what was right and what was wrong. And for the students who didn't achieve mastery, which by the way is up to you where you set that cutoff score, typically 80%, but if the questions are hard, could be less. For the students who didn't get to that level, then the ones who really struggle with the basic no questions, they're going to do one kind of activity about mass and weight, and the ones who really did get that but weren't able to use it in the more challenging questions, they can do the second activity. Here's the first one. We're trying to contrast mass and weight. We start with a little cartoon about mass not changing, and then a little experiment where students experience what it's like with picking up a bottle on the earth, and then a well-labeled camouflage bottle that feels like what it would be on the moon. They put down their experiences using a compare and contrast strategy in a table, and then they can practice what they've just learned in simple questions and finally go back and now see if they could do the ones they got wrong. So that's the basics of the system. Now I'm going to finish by looking at two questions that teachers have been asking. The first one is, can you do all that in one lesson? Well, it does depend on your lesson length. So if you're testing both ideas and you've got an hour, then that's okay. But if you've got a shorter lesson, then here's some other ways you can fit it in. You could do the test at the end of one lesson and then the next lesson start the relearn, or you could split it up so that you do assess one idea at a time, because after all, each idea is often about a week of teaching. That's a good point to have the checkpoint. The other question that comes up is that really enough to raise student achievement? Well, first, let me say it's a core part of the research findings that you use diagnostic information and students have a chance to relearn. But there are two other things at least that we need to do. Firstly, it's very important that in the first teaching of the idea, that the teaching's directed towards those mastery goals. In other words, the ideas and tackling some of the misconceptions. It's no good if you just kind of walk through the double page spreads and learn the key words, but you haven't really tackled the harder idea. And secondly, about implementing mastery for the first time, students will need lots of structure and support at the beginning because it's quite unfamiliar and because we want them to take more responsibility ultimately. So there we are, that's part of the system, and in the next video I'll go through some of the other components. Thank you for watching.